There was a widespread rumor that Madame de Pompadour, the official mistress of Louis XV, built a private brothel in the Palace of Versailles to secure her position at court. This establishment, allegedly named Parc-aux-Cerfs, was said to house dozens of young and beautiful women recruited from the common people. According to the rumor, the king frequently visited this place to indulge in bizarre sexual parties, leading a life of extreme debauchery. This version of the story remains influential even today. However, such claims not only tarnish the reputation of Madame de Pompadour, but also of Louis XV, despite the fact that he was indeed fond of bedroom pleasures. The existence of Parc-aux-Cerfs is a historical fact, but it was far from the scandalous den of vice described in popular accounts. In reality, Parc-aux-Cerfs was originally an old hunting enclosure in the gardens of Versailles, named so because Louis XIV once used it to train for deer hunting. It was not purpose-built as a pleasure house. To understand the truth behind this myth, one must first examine the personality of Louis XV and his preferences in women. Louis XV lost both his parents at the age of 2. When he was 5, his great-grandfather Louis XIV passed away, leaving him with only a distant great-uncle, the Duke of Orléans, as his guardian. At 7, his governess, whom he regarded as a mother figure, was obliged to leave him due to court regulations. This deep sense of loneliness, abandonment, and a lifelong craving for maternal affection contributed to his melancholic disposition. Unlike the ambitious noblewomen of the court, Louis XV was more drawn to pure-hearted and intelligent commoner girls, as they offered him a sense of genuine emotional connection. It was during one of his hunting trips that he encountered Madame de Pompadour, who lived nearby, and he was immediately captivated by her. Madame de Pompadour was the first bourgeois commoner in French history to become an official royal mistress. Before her, this position, often regarded as the king's second consort, had been monopolized by noblewomen for centuries. Her rise to prominence paved the way for more commoner girls, sparking a nationwide trend of aspiring mistresses eager to follow in her footsteps. Many bourgeois and petty bourgeois families began raising and educating their daughters in the hopes that they too might one day achieve the same prestigious status as Madame de Pompadour. After entering the court, Madame de Pompadour was eager to bear the king's child. However, due to her frail constitution and sheer misfortune, she suffered 3 miscarriages within 5 years, severely damaging her health. Doctors warned that another pregnancy could prove fatal. As a result, she was forced to reduce her intimate encounters with Louis XV. Some accounts suggest that she had a naturally low libido and had even tried various herbal remedies, but none succeeded in awakening her passion for intimacy. Regardless of the reason, Louis XV's growing lack of physical satisfaction with Pompadour was indeed a factor that led to the establishment of Parc-aux-Cerfs. However, contrary to popular belief, this secret retreat was not created by Madame de Pompadour herself. Louis XV's personal valet, La Belle, was responsible for selecting commoner girls who wished to enter the court as the king's companions. These young women were typically between the ages of 15 and 25, possessed great beauty, and came from respectable backgrounds with good education. The fewer past romantic experiences they had, the better. Not because Louis XV had any particular obsession with virgins. After all, Madame de Pompadour had been married before and even had a child when she entered the court, but because Label feared that women with extensive experience might carry venereal diseases. At the time, such illnesses were highly contagious and often fatal. Label would only select one girl at a time to accompany the king. Contrary to the salacious rumors, Louis XV never indulged in wild orgies, nor is there any solid evidence to suggest he had such inclinations. The chosen girl would be discreetly escorted to the king's private chambers, where they would have the opportunity to meet. If both the king and the girl found each other agreeable, she would remain in the court. Importantly, this process was mutual. The girl had the right to refuse. There were even instances where a girl, overwhelmed by fear and anxiety, was immediately sent back. However, such cases were rare, as those who entered the court did so voluntarily. Besides, Louis XV was not only the king, but also renowned as the most handsome man in the French court. He was strikingly good-looking, well-mannered, and possessed a gentle temperament. Since these girls were not of noble birth, they could not officially reside in the palace. To accommodate them, Le Bel arranged for a villa within the Parc-aux-Cerfs enclosure to serve as their residence. And that is the true secret behind Parc-aux-Cerfs. The selected girls lived there with personal servants attending to their needs, and all their expenses were handled by Label. In essence, Parc-aux-Cerfs was not a brothel, but rather a private residence where Louis XV discreetly kept his lower-status mistresses. Madame de Pompadour soon became aware of the existence of Parc-aux-Cerfs. At first, she was unbothered, as Louis XV himself rarely visited the villa. However, as more and more young mistresses from Parc-aux-Cerfs began making their way to the king's chambers, she started to feel uneasy. Despite Louis XV's repeated assurances that she was the woman he loved most, the fear of being replaced gradually took hold of her. With her exceptional emotional intelligence, Madame de Pompadour did not resort to arguments or jealousy. Instead, she took the initiative to involve herself in the situation. She sent her most trusted lady-in-waiting to Parc-aux-Cerfs to check on the young mistresses, offering them kind words and frequent gifts. The girls were deeply moved that their idol, Madame de Pompadour, would humble herself to befriend them. In turn, they would sing praises of her kindness and virtue in front of Louis XV, which delighted the king. Over time, Madame de Pompadour became increasingly involved in managing Parc-aux-Cerfs. After all, she was the de facto mistress of the court, and many of the girls' affairs were rather delicate. Issues that Le Bel, as a man, would find difficult or awkward to handle. The most pressing of these concerns was pregnancy. To prevent any scandals, Madame de Pompadour arranged for pregnant mistresses to be discreetly sent to convents, where they would give birth under the care of doctors and midwives. Since these young women were not official royal mistresses, Louis XV never legitimized any of the children. However, this did not mean he was entirely irresponsible. He provided financial support for the children, and if the mother wished to marry, he would arrange a suitable husband for her and offer a generous dowry. Enticed by financial incentives, many men were more than willing to serve the king by becoming the legal fathers of these children. Parc-aux-Cerfs existed for 15 years, during which an estimated 40 to 50 young mistresses resided there, according to historians. Some stayed for only a few months, while others remained for several years, depending entirely on the king's favor. When a mistress no longer held Louis XV's interest, she was granted a generous pension, enough to ensure a comfortable life for the rest of her days. Most of these women eventually married courtiers or palace officials, and some even wed into the nobility. Two of Parc-aux-Cerfs' most famous mistresses were Marie-Louise O'Murphy and Marguerite Catherine Hainaut. Marie-Louise O'Murphy, the inspiration for François Boucher's famous painting La Jeune Fille Allongée, was a striking beauty with golden hair, blue eyes, and a voluptuous figure. She had a lively personality, a talent for music, and was deeply adored by Louis XV. Her favor with the king was so strong that even after becoming pregnant, she was able to return to his side, causing Madame de Pompadour a great deal of anxiety for a time. When she eventually left the court, she departed with an astounding pension of 200,000 livres, a generous dowry, luxurious clothing, and fine jewelry. Louis XV personally arranged her marriage to a noble gentleman from Auvergne. The second notable mistress was Marguerite Catherine Hainaut, whom Louis XV described as an unparalleled beauty. The famous adventurer and womanizer Casanova mentioned her in his memoirs, marveling at her eyes of incomparable beauty and skin of flawless whiteness. She was also a skilled painter, and is said to have once painted a portrait of the king himself. Eventually, Louis XV arranged for her to marry a naval officer. She bore the king 2 daughters, and after his death, they were officially ennobled by his final will. Louis XV left each of them an inheritance of 223,000 livres, ensuring an annual income of 23,400 livres, a sum that guaranteed them a life of wealth and privilege. The closure of Parc-aux-Cerfs began with Madame du Barry, Madame de Pompadour's successor. Unlike her predecessor, she was neither tolerant nor generous. She refused to share her king with anyone. There were even rumors that Madame du Barry herself had once been among the young mistresses of Parc-aux-Cerfs. Regardless of the truth, Louis XV ultimately shut down the establishment to devote himself exclusively to her.